Okay, so I promised that I would start a couple of minutes after 4:30, and it's a couple of minutes after 4:30. So I will get going and people will join as we go along. So please, as I talk, if you've got any questions or you disagree with something, please put it into the chat. I want to keep this as fluid as possible. And I will be asking you some questions as we go along. But for those of you that don't know me, and those of you that have heard this before, I apologise. But I'm Jo Taylor. I'm MD of Let's Talk Talent. My business is 7 years old. It's really hard to believe that it's 7 years old. But I've worked in HR for my sins for probably 30 years or more. I didn't actually start off in HR. I started off as a creative at the BBC, ran a brand at Channel 4, and then did global talent and learning roles. So I've had to create a number of L&D strategies, if not HR and talent strategies along the way. And I really want this webinar to be about hints and tips and techniques that I've learned along the way that I can hopefully impart on you, but also show you how easy it is to create Kickass L&D for the modern workforce. And the reason why I think that is that ultimately, as we go through today, we're going to talk about how L&D enhances performance, because that's what we're here to do. We're all here as HR professionals to enhance performance and unlock potential. And L&D has a really strong part in not only looking at people and upskilling their skills and knowledge, but also equipping them for the potential roles that they go on to in the future. We're going to look at the modern L&D landscape, and wow, is it vast compared to when I first started, and a tad confusing if I'm honest with you. So let's have a look at it and try and make it simple. Really and truthfully, in anything to do with L&D, it's the meshing of the organizational needs and the individual wants. And so we're going to really talk about the audience needs and wants and how you can really think about that. Channels that you might want to activate, and a lot of you will be using a lot of these, but there may be some different channels that you might could dial up, could dial down, depending on your needs and wants. How you measure impact, because I'm sure a lot of you are being asked the question, how do we measure the success of what we do? And it's not just about the happy sheets and afterwards. It's much more nuanced than that. And we're going to be looking at Kirkpatrick's model, which a lot of you will know, but how do you put that into practice? And if you stay for the next, I'd say 35, 40 minutes of this webinar, there's some bonus goodies at the end and how we can kind of turn you into marketing experts, but there's also some tools and techniques that we can share with you that can get you going. So sound like a plan? You all thought you were supposed to be on this webinar? Awesome. Okay, so I can see there are more people coming in and you're adding into that chat. So fantastic. Love it. Okay, so fundamentally, I believe that L&D has an integral part to the employee experience. And the reason why I think that is that in all the roles that I've done, whether it's running my own consultancy now or being a global talent and learning director, it really is about how you create that join up. L&D helps you get great people, because people want to know that they're going to have development, that there's a career path, there's an opportunity, but it also helps you keep great people. So if you're telling people and showing them how to develop their career, you're giving them the guide rails, you're creating opportunities for them to enhance their skills, develop on the job, create stretch. You're enabling people to be the best that they can be. So you've got performance and you've ultimately got potential. And the best organizations I've ever worked with know that L&D links across the employee experience. They don't have it as a standalone function. They have it within a talent function, and they build leadership into it, and they create that join up for the employee experience. If you keep it separate, then it just becomes about training. And I think L&D has definitely, in my experience, gone beyond just training. And I like to say, and my team will always laugh at me, it's about resources, not courses. So that's the old world was training, the new world is learning and ultimately development. So if we believe that L&D links to across the employee experience. Why is it important? Well, for me, it goes again into threes, and you'll notice a pattern as I do this webinar that I tend to think in threes. I try to keep things super simple. And it's important from an individual, a team, and an organizational level. For individuals, it's about enhancing performance, enhancing the performance on the job to make them drive harder, faster, and better. And through your performance management approaches, you'll be giving feedback and you'll be enabling people to understand where their gaps and opportunities, and training and development can really help. But it's also about the potential of how you're enhancing that knowledge, that skills and attributes. So an individual gains a huge amount from learning and development. For teams, it's about how you bring people together. So team days, opportunities for people to learn together collectively, but also in programs that you might run, how you're creating that cross-functional, that collaboration, that creative thinking. Because also in teams with learning and development, you're tapping into people's strengths, drivers, and motivations if you're doing it in the right way, because you're enabling people to understand and the ecosystem in which they work in that particular team. And then if you take that up to 35,000 feet and look at it as an organizational level, fundamentally improves the bottom line. Because if you have people that are skilled, that are working together, that are innovating, that are in a way driving high performance, then your business is going to be able to move faster, it's going to be more innovative, it's going to come up with more ideas. And it's a real lever in how you would recruit, so the great attraction, and hopefully stop the great resignation. So you can see that L&D is important at an individual, a team, and an organizational level. Does that make sense? Just put into the chat, yes, no, you agree, you disagree. Love to kind of get your thoughts. Brilliant, totally. Love it. Thank you for all agreeing with me. That's really good. I've obviously pitched this in the right way. So if we believe that it feeds through the employee experience, why it's important at those three levels, I kind of want to ask you a question now. How do you learn? So put into the chat, when you think about that question, how do you learn? Could be that you learn through others. It could be that you learn on the job. Could be through reading. Could be listening to a podcast. Asking questions, Sarah. Doing them, reflecting, Catherine. Experiences. A mix. Brilliant. From mentors, through other experience, love it. Brilliant. So we all learn in different ways, right? That shows that there's no one way. Savita, you're totally right. Sometimes through experience and reflection, and sometimes by getting things wrong. So if that's how you learn, how do you develop yourself? So slightly nuanced question. So how do you develop yourself into the next role or into something new? Is it the same? Is it different? Nikki, there will be a replay. We'll send that out if you can't hear. So Phil, focus and practice. Apply the knowledge in a project. Setting goals, being intentional. Courses, mentors, feedback, actioning, love it. So a lot of you are talking about how you're putting yourself into different experiences. And when you think back to those two questions, how you learn, it's much more about the resources, isn't it? And how do you develop yourself is much more about the courses. So what's really interesting is that you've got an eclectic mix of sometimes learning on the job through experiences, through mentors, through knowledge exchange, through asking questions. But ultimately, how we learn and how we develop ourselves can be fundamentally different. And what is right for you as an individual may not be right for a member of your team or for other people in your network. And I think it's sometimes these questions are really relevant when you're talking to people about how they want to develop their career. I use them in coaching. I ask, well, how do you learn? How do you learn? And also, what have you done to develop yourself? And you learn a lot from asking those questions, because it really makes you think about, are they the same? And they're subtly different. So hopefully you can use those questions in how you challenge individuals and teams to think about their learning differently. So if you think about how you learn and how you develop yourself, for me, there is a difference between learning and development. They're not the same thing, but they're ultimately driving to the same point, which is about enhancing the performance of your people. And you do that through learning, through the resources, not courses. And we're going to talk to you about that today. We're going to focus much more on the learning part in this webinar than the development, because actually the formal ways of learning in development is only 10%. The way we develop ourselves is 70% on the job, 20% through informal networks. So that is peers, mentors, family, friends, social networks. But 10% is focused on the courses and that learning piece. But as L&D professionals, we are challenged to work just on that 10%, when really we should be encouraging the organization to think about the remaining 90%. And that's what I would really encourage you to think about. How much effort are you putting into 10% over the 90%? I'd love to kind of hear from you. Do you have that philosophy in your organization? Are you spending a lot of time, too much time on the 10%? Let me know in the chat. It'd be great to kind of get your thoughts and feelings on that. So when you think about learning ultimately, and the areas in which you want to enhance and that require support, they fall into these 4 areas. Technical skills. So those are the technical skills. Very much about, if you're an accountant, if you're in finance and you need accountancy, if you're in data, you need insights. All of the technical capabilities that people need to do their job and will enhance their performance. And you might be enhancing someone's performance in a specialist role, but you might also be thinking about somebody moving into a different role. I was on a panel this week on Monday where someone had been a technical expert in legal and had decided that he wanted to do an apprenticeship and train to be in marketing. So he was changing his technical capability, and the business supported him in doing that. So there is a part to play in enhancing technical skills. So think about that in terms of the budget that you have and what the propensity is for you wanting to put effort into that. There's also areas, some of you will be working in industries that has mandatory learning, legal requirements. So there's parts that people have to do, and that you have to, you might be in a regulated environment and have to have that mandatory learning. But how are you creating that so it doesn't feel as if it's one size fits all, even though you have to do it? There's also pieces around leadership skills. So a lot of you on this call will have leadership programs or be thinking about how you're looking at aspiring leaders and aspiring managers, as well as new managers, fundamentals, but also your leadership and how are you enhancing people's leadership capability? Because we know that leadership has changed fundamentally over the last couple of years with the pandemic. And then there's the soft skills, the behavioral skills, or even the human skills around communication, around empathy, around collaboration, teamwork. So when you're thinking about those individual, team and organization, think about the levers in which you can pull in all of those 4 buckets, and think about where you need to place your budget and where you need to place your emphasis, because that will be driven by the business need, not the individual want. So if those are the areas that require support, here's the modern the L&D landscape. And I don't know if you you're like me, but when I looked at this, I thought, where do you start? This wasn't like it used to be. You used to have one LMS, and you used to commission everything, and you used to have loads of partners delivering loads of your learning and development. You've got free tools, freemium tools. You've got Coursera. You've got LinkedIn Learning. You've got Bespoke. You've got things around skills and jobs, learning support, experiential learning, new models. Where do you start? What do you buy? What's better than other things? Well, fear not. Yes, it's fantastic to know about the modern L&D landscape, and really important to have a finger on the pulse. But you don't need to do everything. If you do everything, they still won't come to an LMS. It's not Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. Actually, you need to give people a reason for why they need that skill, that knowledge, that experience. And the reason why I say that is that actually, when you think about, and this may be a generational, we were having this conversation, Charlie and I, and we were briefing a blog today about the way in which we've seen how we've enhanced our knowledge, and how Charlie's kids or my nephews learn. They've learned to swipe from a toddler. When they look at books, they don't have the same feeling that I do when I go into a Waterstones or a Foyles to kind of get a book. Technology is moving at such a pace. And really, truthfully, when I want to know how to do something, so I wanted to know how to change a washer on my tap. Believe it or not, I can change a washer on a tap now. I put it into Google, and it came up with YouTube, and it showed me step by step how I could change that washer in the tap. But other people will use Siri, and they'll use voice much more than, in some way, an old world way of putting it into Google. So actually, if people want to know how to do something, you are competing as an L&D team, as an HR collective with Google and Siri. And we have to be better than Google and Siri. Now, that is a daunting task. Don't tell me, I know that. But people will automatically go to those platforms above coming to your LMS. It's a fact. Because it's simple. They can click on it. It's done. So how do we create a way that people can value what you're creating and what you're spending huge amounts of money and time and resource to do? So how many of you does that resonate with? How many of you do that yourself when you need to find something out? How many of you on the call use Siri or Google? Again, put into the chat. It'd be really interesting to know whether you're using that. Brilliant. Thank you, April. So when we think about, so you go, look, Google all the time, Google mainly, brilliant. So it really resonates. And so you can really see that ultimately we're having to compete with Google and Siri. So now when you think about that, if we know that that's what we're having to compete with, understanding your audience needs is going to be really important and relevant. And you do that by asking yourself these questions. So first of all, what are your training needs? What's your business strategy? Where are you going? What does your business need? Is it growing? Are there certain areas declining? A lot of people will go to a training needs analysis in terms of what the organization needs and think about the gap and the opportunity. But really, what is the training needed to drive those business ambitions ultimately? Is your L&D going to be linked to your business objectives? So, when you think about your performance management and thinking about people's objectives, not only do their business objectives need to be linked to their personal objectives, but they also need to be thinking about how that enhances performance ultimately. And that can be from an individual or from a team perspective. Are you mapping your L&D and identifying your into succession plans? Are you creating different deals for different communities, for your high potentials, your highly regarded specialists, or the talented many, as we like to call them, as everybody? Do people know where they sit? Do they need to know where they sit? But also, how are you creating different opportunities at different stages of your career? And do you have competency frameworks? So some people have training linked into it, so that if people want to know how they get from A to B to C to D, even if in a squiggly career perspective, do they understand the skills, training, attributes and relationships that are going to help them build their learning plan? So those questions are really going to help you in understanding your audience needs. And this is where, personas and really getting into the mindset of that modern learner is going to be really important. And the way to think about that is using this model. And I sort of glossed over it when I sort of said glibly, skills, training, attributes, and relationships. But this is how we tend to work with organizations. We use the STAR persona map, and we really map out the skills, not the technical. These are the human skills, the training that's required, the attributes and relationships, and they really focus on roles. And they can be, we did this with an HR team, and we're working currently with an organization to, look at this at a grade level. So you're mapping it with career paths, and you're giving people not only what they need to do, but how they need to do it. So they go completely harmoniously together, and enable people to understand. And by using this model, it enables you to simplify it, and then you can link really clearly out to the training that is the most relevant, or the learning that's most relevant to that particular persona. And if anyone would like to know more about it, Charlie's just put into the chat a link to the STAR template if you want to play with it and think about it for yourself. So when we think of, we've talked about needs, and now we want to focus on wants. And your audience wants a lot of things. And it's not just about buying it from external providers, as I've said at the end here. You've got experts, you've got knowledge, you've got brilliance sitting within your organization. How are you unlocking that ultimately? So it's very much about bringing the inside out as well as the outside in terms of answering this question in terms of your audience wants. And really and truthfully, when I think about the organizations that we work with in learning and development, we really think about that most of the audience wants it to be available on any device. So it's not just about on desktop, it's mobile first, it's tablet. Can they, if you're traveling, can you download something? Can you quickly read a PDF? Can you look at a TED talk? Whatever it is, available on any device. It needs to be accessible on demand. So, people need to be able to look at it anytime, anywhere, on any place. The content needs to be high quality. So it doesn't mean that you have to spend a lot of money and high production values, but it needs to be something that people will want to watch, and no more, I would say, than 10 minutes at any time if you were doing video or a podcast. So not expecting people to watch things for an hour or an hour and a half. We're doing a project at the moment around reviewing a company's induction, and there is 4 90-minute videos to watch as part of the induction. No one's going to sit there and watch that. And they're brilliant. They're really wonderful, but people don't have the time, especially when you join an organization. So really think about bite-size learning, and it's very much about task. What is the task that you want people to do as a result of watching that learning? And there has to be a call to action at the end of it. And that's where you're really starting to think of yourself as a marketing expert, ultimately. So available on any device, accessible on demand, high quality content that people value and they want to watch, and ultimately bite-sized, no more than 10 minutes. So you can buy in from external providers, but as I said, really think about how you could create it in-house as well. And the reason why I say that is because of this model that was developed by Donald Taylor quite a while ago, nearly 10 years ago, called the Learning Content Pyramid. And the reason why I really like it is it works on two axes ultimately. The first is sort of the contextual relevance. So is it relevant to the needs of the organization? And then the volume of materials. And the two go hand in hand, because if you look at the triangle, at the bottom, you've got huge volume of freely available content. So you can buy that in, Coursera, LinkedIn Learning, all of the kind of freely available content, but you have to search a long way to find the right thing. So it might be available, but is it relevant? And is it built to your organizational structure, values, language? And as you go up the pyramid at the top, you've got the more expensive content, which is externally commissioned, but it's contextually relevant because it's bespoke to your organization. It might be in your own branding, it's in your own words, but it's got higher value. It's more expensive than obviously but it's going to be much more contextually relevant. And as you go up, you can see that you can look at libraries, you can look at curated internally, but really think about that relevance versus volume. How much do you need to create, and how much can you buy in, and how much does it relate ultimately to the wants of your audience and ultimately the needs of the business going forward? So it's a really nice model for balancing the needs and wants within your business. So what are you doing to understand your audience wants and needs? I want to turn that over to you. How are you understanding that what your business wants and needs? Take a moment to have a think and put that into the chat. Are you doing focus groups? Are you looking at your happy sheets? Are you talking to external providers? Are you looking at the modern landscape? What are you doing to understand your audience wants and needs? Survey, brilliant. Thank you, Sandra. That's fantastic. Talking to people, lovely, Jess. Creating a for input. So Pat, we're currently creating a survey for staff to input, and from this we'll run a series of focus groups in the summer. Love it. Focus groups, one-to-one evaluations, TNA meetings, for external, looking at prior successful. Brilliant. Love it. So you're really taking an understanding of understanding your audience and adapting and thinking through how you do that. Love it. Learning needs analysis skills, scans, surveys, informal, brilliant. And you can also look at it through performance management. If you have development objectives, talking to your business partners, getting to involve with your heads of department, focus groups, exactly all the things that you've mentioned. So fantastic practice going on there. Wonderful. So when you think about understanding your audience's needs and wants, here's the channels which you can activate. And I won't go through all of them because you can see them on the screen, but there's everything from, informal mentoring and setting up mentoring programs. We mentioned that on Monday on our panel about mentoring. And if any of you are looking for a mentor or would like to be a mentor, we have a free mentoring program, which we're really happy to mention on this webinar today, but would welcome anybody if it helps you. There's also digital learning, formal programs, social media, video, podcasts. So there's loads of channels in which you can activate, and all of you, I'm sure, will be using a number of those. So we're not devoid of channels ultimately to activate, but it's going to be which ones are going to be more important to you. And by knowing your audience's needs and wants, you're going to be dialing up or dialing down which ones are more relevant and useful in your organization. So therefore, when doing that, we also need to become marketing experts, because how many people have thought this? You know what, I've got 30 minutes. Let me have a look at some e-learning on communication skills. Who ever says that? I've never said it. I've got a free 30 minutes. I'm going to take the dog out for a walk. I'm not going to try and do learning. I'm knackered. your business is working at such a pace. That's not what your business is saying. So we need to make people want to come to the learning that we're providing. Because if we think that people are going to be thinking like that, then we're going to be in danger of not listening to our audience needs and wants. And the way in which you can start to become marketing experts is through a live example that I'm going to give you of a client that's worked with us for 5 years. They're a global publishing business, and they decided 5 years ago that they wanted to move their L&D from very traditional, which was all around face-to-face learning, to blended, and have the majority, 80% of the learning delivered through a learning management system called Loop, and then 20% through courses and webinars. Now that's changed over the 5 years, but they have consistently thought like marketing experts because they've created learning and development campaigns. They really worked hard on gaining initial awareness, and I did roadshows with the CEO and the HRD around the business to build initial awareness of why they were changing their L&D focus, how they were doing it, and what people could expect. They've consistently maintained a sustained interest in learning and development. So it's enabled people, they talk about it, they have an L&D forum, which is made up of people within the business, but they're trying to maintain a sustained interest in learning and development, keep it really relevant. And they've also tried to create the push and pull of content and marketing. So they've really tried to push content, but they've also tried to get people to tell their stories and give more ideas on what they needed in terms of marketing. And the way that they've done that is they've created internal comms plans around elements, so playlists, topics that are really relevant. So they've linked it to the business strategy from the outset and created campaigns. They've aligned with leaders in the business through the L&D forum, and they've held the L&D forum accountable for how they build every quarter their sort of campaign. So they're meeting their wants, and also the L&D forum is keeping the quality really high in terms of what they need to deliver. And they've also blended the webinar content with online content. So if they were doing a webinar on resilience, they would link that directly to L&D content, so that you'd have a reason to go after that webinar to create that greater link. So not rocket science. I'm sure a lot of you are doing this already, but over the 5 years, they've realized that they've had to work harder to create that sustainability. And really, truthfully, we're all being asked, if you've looked at your needs and wants, the channels that you've tried to activate, you've created that marketing campaign, you're going to need to think about how you measure the impact of your L&D. And all of you will know Kirkpatrick's evaluation model, and I'm not going to go through it in huge amounts of detail. But most of the time, we are measuring stages 1, reaction, and stage 2, learning. So how did participants react to the happy sheets? And we do that ourselves and say, would you recommend it? So net promoter score, to really see how people had reacted to that training. So we know whether it was pitched right, whether they found it relevant, but also for the facilitator, how they can improve. And then maybe after 3 to 6 months, you might do some evaluation around what did the participants learn. You might talk to the managers around if they've seen any difference, whether that training and the skills have improved. But it's much harder to measure the impact around behaviour and results, especially around results, how the organisation has benefited. And really, the importance of this slide is about that. Start to think about how you can measure that behaviour and that results, but that takes time. And at the moment, everyone seems to be really, very busy and want instant results. You're never going to get stage 3 or stage 4 before about a year, 18 months, if not 2 years. So start to think about how you build that into the way that you measure the impact of your L&D, and also make people aware that it's going to take time to deliver some of those more organizational and behavioral change. So when you think about measuring the impact of your L&D, try and utilize existing performance measures. And we have a handy helper handout which we can send you, and Charlie will put hopefully into the chat. If you're looking to think about how you might measure those results, we've created an HR metrics toolkit which you can have a look at, and hopefully might help you. But try and make sure that it utilizes the current business performance measures. Only measure things that you're prepared to or able to change. Don't set yourself an unholy goal. This is about quality impact rather than quantity, and that ultimately you are able to change things. Don't overpromise and underdeliver ultimately. Understand that learning is often not only the impact on performance, but what else is it impacting? So that could be culture, that could be diversity, it could be inclusion, it could be retention. Think about how it's not only impacting performance, but also how it's impacting potential career paths, all the things like sort of the join up that I talked about. And only put effort into measuring something if the value of the results outweigh the effort required to get them. So what I mean by that is don't create a whole list of metrics that's going to take you forever to measure. Think about the 1 or 2, 3 or 4 maximum that are going to be easy for you to measure, and continue to build on that as you go forward. Because if you put huge amounts of effort into measurement, you're going to take your eye off the ball in terms of the needs and the wants and the different channels and the ways that you can activate. So how are you currently measuring your L&D performance? I'd love to hear, I've given you some ideas, and we've obviously given you an opportunity to download the Ultimate Guide to HR Metrics, but I'd love to hear how you're measuring your L&D. Again, put into the chat, be great to hear. Okay, would you continue to put that in if you want to? That'd be great. Brilliant, Rachel. Thank you. In link with the progression of staff. Love it. Okay, so in summary, you have to compete with Google. Be compelling with your options. Really think about what your people want and what they need. So really make sure that you get the balance between the want and the need. Choose the right media and channels for development. So think about, the way that people learn, the best ways of activating that. Measure at the points that will highlight the impact, and measure often so that you're kind of showing that. Don't wait till the end of the year. Measure it on a quarterly basis, measure it on a monthly basis. We do a lot of reports for clients, on a monthly basis. Think about the themes, how the things are all linking together. Don't forget to market your development. As I said, the field of dreams analogy, if you build it, they will come. Doesn't happen. Really think about that consistent marketing approach. And really and truthfully, your HR strategy, like any strategy, should be a plan on a page. It should be a plan of, what are the needs and wants, and how are the channels, and how you're going to activate them, and where you need that investment ultimately. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how you can create a kick-ass L&D strategy. And it gives you some tools and techniques that you can put into practice now. So if that's what you agree with, and that's really helped you, here's some ways in which we can help you. So you can download our blank star persona map, and I know that Charlie put it into the chat earlier. So he's put it in again. So if you want to use that persona map to really think about the needs of your people, then please feel free to download it. It's completely free and love you to use it. We've also got, and I've only been really able to tip a little bit of the iceberg today in terms of L&D strategy. If you wanted to download a white paper, again, it's free in terms of how you build an L&D strategy. It's a recipe for L&D success. Again, that's in the chat just now. So please feel free to download that, and hopefully that gives you all the ingredients. Tomorrow we're running Leader of the Pack. It's a new workshop which looks at how you can lead, manage, and develop teams through the example of dog training and practical exercises. So we're not comparing people to dogs, but we are saying that ultimately the same traits in the way that you energize, how you communicate, how you activate, can be relevant in the way that you motivate, engage, and activate teams. So we're running it tomorrow in Wallace Space in Covent Garden. If anyone's got an hour and a half free from 9 till 10:30 and would like to join, then please feel free. Some of you will know my dog, the Chief Dog Officer, Dylan, and he's going to be there strutting his stuff. So if you want to meet Dylan, a member of the team, then please come along. But there's also more information, and I think it's really relevant at the moment when we're thinking about team energy. Thank you, Pat, for saying that. I'm really pleased that you enjoyed it, and it's really lovely that you've put that comment in. Thank you so much. And then if anybody's looking for support in terms of content around any of those skills or human skills, then we run a number of workshops, boot camps and sprints. And we'd be really delighted to talk to you about how we could create those bespoke for your organisation. And we have a whole learning catalogue. So if you'd like to know more about that, then please click on the link or send me a message. I'm really happy to jump on a call. And we also, if anybody's looking to enhance development conversations, and specifically around development in careers, then we have career coaching cards which can be used by individuals and managers. So if you'd like to buy a set of those, then again, the link is in the chat. We'd be really happy to talk to you about those. And finally, no hard sell, but if you just want to have a chat, I like to talk, I'm pretty nosy, as some of my team will tell you, and you want to have a chat about what you're doing and would just like some advice, then please feel free to book a 30-minute consultation with me. I'm really happy to talk to you and give you any advice or guidance. So that's the end of this webinar. I hope that you've really enjoyed it, and I'm really open to any questions. Does anybody have any questions that they might want to ask that may have come up during the webinar that I may not have covered? Please feel free to put it into the chat, and I can answer them. It's a pleasure, Sarah. I'm so pleased that you were able to come, and I hope you really enjoyed it. Brilliant. So if there's no more questions, I'm delighted that you all came on a sunny Thursday afternoon to this How to Create a Kick-Ass L&D Strategy. I'm just really proud to have been able to run all of these webinars this week as part of Learning at Work Week, and so many people have got so much out of them. This is why we do it. It's really important to give back. And I'm just delighted that we've been able to get together even for a short 45 minutes today. And I wish you well. Go forth and create your kick-ass L&D strategy, and have a great afternoon. Take care. Lisa, you've asked me a question. Any tips for the best way to understand audience wants? Yeah, I think really and truthfully, when you're thinking about focus groups, one-to-ones, looking back at the way that people consume content that you've already got, thinking about the different generations that work in your organization, and just experimenting. I think the most important thing is to experiment with lots of different ways of looking at content. And I think if you can do that, then you'll start to get an understanding of what's working and what isn't, and be able to dial up or dial down. So I hope that helps, and I'm very happy to have a chat if you need more information.